This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good afternoon. We're coming on the air with breaking news. The first public remarks from President Trump following the U.S. military strike that killed Iran's top general. Let's listen to the president in Florida.
Soleimani was plotting imminent and sinister attacks on American diplomats and military personnel, but we caught him in the act and terminated him. Under my leadership, America's policy is unambiguous to terrorists who harm or intend to harm any American. We will find you. We will eliminate you. We will always protect our diplomats, service members, all Americans, and our allies. For years, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its ruthless Quds Force under Soleimani's leadership has targeted, injured, and murdered hundreds of American civilians and servicemen. The recent attacks on U.S. targets in Iraq, including rocket strikes that killed an American and injured 4 American servicemen very badly, as well as a violent assault on our embassy in Baghdad, were carried out at the direction of Soleimani. Soleimani made the death of innocent people his sick passion, contributing to terrorist plots as far away as New Delhi and London. Today, we remember and honor the victims of Soleimani's many atrocities, and we take comfort in knowing that his reign of terror is over. Soleimani has been perpetrating acts of terror to destabilize the Middle East for the last 20 years. What the United States did yesterday should have been done long ago. A lot of lives would have been saved. Just recently, Soleimani led the brutal repression of protesters in Iran, where more than 1,000 innocent civilians were tortured and killed by their own government. We took action last night to stop a war. We did not take action to start a war. I have deep respect for the Iranian people. They are a remarkable people with an incredible heritage and unlimited potential. We do not seek regime change. However, the Iranian regime's aggression in the region, including the use of proxy fighters to destabilize its neighbors, must end, and it must end now. The future belongs to the people of Iran, those who seek peaceful coexistence and cooperation, not the terrorist warlords who plunder their nation to finance bloodshed abroad. The United States has the best military by far anywhere in the world. We have the best intelligence in the world. If Americans anywhere are threatened, we have all of those targets already fully identified, and I am ready and prepared to take whatever action is necessary. And that in particular refers to Iran. Under my leadership, we have destroyed the ISIS territorial caliphate. And recently, American Special Operations Forces killed the terrorist leader known as al-Baghdadi. The world is a safer place without these monsters. America will always pursue the interests of good people, great souls, while seeking peace, harmony, and friendship with all of the nations of the world. Thank you. God bless you. God bless our great military, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. President, you say you do this.
President taking no questions, making those brief remarks, his first remarks since the killing of Qasem Soleimani, the top general in Iran. He was attacked in an aerial ambush in Baghdad. The president saying he took the action to stop a war, not to start a war. Let's go to Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell in our Washington newsroom. What's your first take here, Andrea?
Well, I think exactly that, saying that he is not trying to start a war, he's trying to stop a war. So saying that they were playing defense, not specifying, obviously, the intelligence or what was the imminent threat, but we've been told by officials at various departments around town, including the State Department, that there were dozens, if not hundreds of Americans, diplomats, civilians, as well as U.S. military, who were at risk, they say, imminently under threat. They claim, of course, the most recent being the siege of the embassy, the Baghdad embassy, which is the largest embassy in the world. And as well fortified as it was, it did take 2 days. And fortification of 100 Marines coming in, and then more troops going to Kuwait nearby. Also, our Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kuby reporting today that 500 remaining U.S. troops from Fort Bragg are going to be deployed, the last part of that rapid global response force going to Kuwait, ready to go into Baghdad if necessary and into the region. Fortifications at embassies around the world, Lester, as well as higher security, U.S. civilians being told to get out of Iraq, get out today. We've seen pictures, which we'll be sharing as well later on Nightly News, of U.S. oil workers leaving Basra. Interestingly, oil prices are not markedly up. The oil markets seem to be taking a lot into account here. They've discounted this really global change in the posture towards Iran from this administration. This is a complete changing point, turning point in U.S.-Iranian relations. But despite that, oil markets are not reacting, and largely because America is now the world's largest exporter of crude oil, and therefore we are not as dependent on the Persian Gulf and on that choke point, the Strait of Hormuz, that Iranian patrol boats can turn on and turn off.
All right, Andrea Mitchell, thanks. Let me go to Richard Engel. He has made his way inside Iraq. The president, from what he said there, suggested that this would end nefarious actions by the Iranians. Things don't work that simple in that part of the world, as you know better than I. What is the expectation? What is the anticipation as Iran has vowed revenge?
Well, Iran is vowing revenge. Iranian officials going all the way up to the supreme leader saying that they will seek vengeance, but they're not specifying when, where, or how, only that there will be American bodies in the Middle East. Whether that's tomorrow, in a week, in a year, we have no idea. But Iran has a lot of capabilities. It has proxy militias in Iraq that it can operate, that it can mobilize, that are armed, that are effective. It has Hezbollah in Lebanon. It has militias in Syria. It has forces in Afghanistan. So if Iran decides that it wants to respond, it's not going to be in a traditional, conventional way. It's not going to send tanks to go meet American troops and fire artillery shells at them. That's also possible, but less likely. More anticipated is that there will be some use of these Iranian proxies, these Iranian militias and agents that it has all across the region, that they will be mobilized and could be directed to carry out attacks against U.S. interests. And I think that's why we're seeing those extra forces being brought in as force protection, as a deterrent to try to tell Iran that if it does that kind of thing, there will be more prices to pay. But the next 48 hours are going to be very volatile in Baghdad and in Tehran, because what's expected to happen tomorrow, right near the U.S. Embassy that saw protesters backed by Iran, backed by these Iraqi pro-Iranian militias, those protesters are going to go out on the streets tomorrow, and they are going to commemorate the death of Qasem Soleimani and one of the Shiite militia leaders who was killed with him at the Baghdad airport in this American drone strike. After that, his body will be moved to Tehran for more official celebrations of his martyrdom, and then we could see some sort of action. The militias so far that we've been speaking to say they are in a wait-and-see mode. They are mobilizing, they are preparing for tomorrow's event, but they are not giving any indications of what they have in store. But the president of Iraq, the official leadership, they're calling for calm. They are saying that cooler heads need to prevail, that this period should not send Iraq deep into a spiral of violence. They worry that it could provoke another civil war, another outbreak of violence in this country. So you have the government calling for calm, militias mobilizing tomorrow, and the U.S. Embassy on its highest possible state of alert starting now.
Richard Engel in Iraq, thanks. Let's go to Hallie Jackson, our chief White House correspondent. Hallie, a couple things to note. That first of all, that statement was put together rather hastily. I know you guys got late word it was happening. But also the president seemed to measure his words very carefully. Didn't take questions, and his level of threats or warnings toward Iran seemed to be somewhat tempered. Did you pick up on any of that?
For sure, Lester. And he also talked about how the United States policy and position is not regime change in Iran, which was clearly intended to be a signal to the Iranians here. Lester, this was an unexpected on-camera appearance from President Trump, but one that was perhaps inevitable given the news over the last 18 or 24 hours or so. I've been talking with sources close to the president in and around the White House as he is down here in South Florida for that holiday break. They tell me that the president was making calls to his friends, to his political allies this morning, making the same defense you just heard him lay out to the American people of why this strike happened. I'm told the president is feeling resolved, confident in his decision, no hesitation, no regrets, that this was the right move for him to make, despite some of the fallout you were already seeing overseas and the fallout here at home as well. Because what's happening now politically, the president is facing serious criticism from members of Congress for not notifying certain key members of Congress, certain key Democrats and Republicans in advance of the strike, and for not seeking congressional authorization as well. I'm told the president has no concerns about the authorization piece of it, that they feel like, the White House feels like they are on solid footing and solid ground with carrying out this strike. The question now that the president will have to answer, and you're right, he did not take questions, Lester, which was different when you and I spoke the night that the president, or the day the president announced the death of another highly wanted terrorist, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He took questions from reporters then for 20, 30 minutes, getting into extraordinary detail about the strike, the raid in that instance. You did not see this now, and that appeared to be an intentional choice from the president and from the White House. But here's the question he will have to answer. What is the strategy now moving forward when Iran, and it is almost certainly when Iran retaliates, not if Iran retaliates? I'm told by my sources that the White House and the administration have been prepping responses in the event that that happens, Lester.
Yeah, the question of what would the next step be. Hallie Jackson, thanks. Garrett Haake is watching things on Capitol Hill. A lot of moving parts. What we're not talking about is impeachment, but that certainly is hovering behind all this.
Yeah, Lester, and it's possible that the lingering bad blood and lack of trust over impeachment is part of the reason why Democrats were not notified about this strike. In fact, very few congressional leaders were notified in advance at all, although I can tell you that two Democratic leaders, the top Democrats on the intelligence committees in both the House and Senate, received briefings today, and they came away from those seeming to believe that, in fact, there was some kind of imminent threat here that needed to be acted upon in some manner. The big question now, what goes on from here? Hallie teed this up. Congressional leaders want to know what's the broader strategy here. They may support the president tactically in making this strike, but they want to know what's the U.S. government's approach more broadly going to be towards Iran. All of this happening as the Senate returned today. Senate leaders saying there is still no deal yet on the contours, the rules for an impeachment trial that could start essentially any minute if such a deal is struck. But for now, impeachment in an impasse still, and members of Congress waiting for that classified briefing that they'll likely bet when most of them return next week.
And Garrett, to be clear, no member of Congress was alerted to this action or brief?
Lindsey Graham, a constant ally of the president, a Republican senator, but not someone in the top leadership ranks, says he was told that this was a possibility some time ago when he was in Florida. And the Republican House leader, Kevin McCarthy, was at Mar-a-Lago last night. It's possible he was told, but not the traditional Gang of Eight leadership.
All right, Garrett, thanks very much. We'll have full coverage, expanded coverage on Nightly News shortly. For now, I'm Lester Holt in New York. Good day.